Hey class, for this part of our final project, we are going to be packing our UV shells and preparing our model for Substance Painter. We're going to be first packing our UV shells into one or more UDIMs, that's that 0 to 1 space, and we're going to be doing that by material. I'm going to be showing you a new method where we use one material and we can pack all of our shells into one or more UDIMs. Okay, next we'll check our UV shells with the checkerboard setting and just make sure that they all look okay. And then next we will create our low resolution models. So basically we're going to clean up the outliner, delete history, freeze transformations, label the model with _low, and then we're going to smooth it out just once and add holding edges. And finally, we'll save that low resolution model as an FBX or OBJ. Next, we're going to duplicate that low res model to create a high res model. We're going to label that with _high. We're going to smooth it one or more times, add some holding edges if needed, and save that as an FBX or OBJ. And then finally, I'm going to go into Substance Painter, create our new file with the low resolution model, turn on the options for UDIMs if we use them, and then bake the high resolution model to the low. And then finally, we're going to fix any issues before moving on. It's really important not to move further if there's baking issues. All right, let's get started. Okay, so we're back in Maya. And I'm just going to show you what I had so far. So basically I have 3 different materials right now. So the first is the head material, which is white. Then I have the green, which is a number of kind of metal pieces. All of these pieces are currently packed into one UDIM. So that's the 0 to 1 space. And then in a separate UDIM, I have these turquoise or teal pieces as well. So those are also packed into a UDIM. And then finally the head is packed into a separate 0 to 1 space. I'm going to show you a new method in a minute where I pack all of my pieces into one 0 to 1 space and assign a single material. This is something we didn't do last time. If you want to use the multiple materials, just make sure that they are packed in separate UDIMs and they don't overlap. So that's option 1 is the separate materials, and then we'll do option 2. Just to show you, the separate materials is very similar to what we did the first time around with the cake. So basically once you load them into Substance Painter, you will have your texture set list with different UV tiles. So this first tile has my body materials, my arm materials are in the separate UV tile, and then the last one is in a third UV tile. So that's one option. It is slightly less efficient, but you, especially if you have just, if you're not using this in a game, it's okay to use multiple tiles. But I just want to show you the method of using one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is select my entire object, right click, and assign a new material. For this material, I'm going to use an AI standard surface, and let's just call this unified texture. Cool. And so now everything is this one texture, and it's still packed into 3 separate UDIMs. If I would like to, say, optimize this for a video game, what I'm going to do is select my whole model, go to Modify, and Layout. Now you can see this is packed, every single piece of this model, into one UDIM. Let's check the checkerboard for this. So the advantage of using just one UDIM is that it'll be a lot smaller of a file if I do want to use this for a game, for example. However, there's less space or less pixels that are going to be devoted to showing off my texture. So if I have some really highly detailed textures, when we're in Substance Painter, rather than using like a 2160 texture size, we can use 4K or even 8K to crank up a little bit better resolution. Okay, so I am happy with the checkerboard. There's no particular stretching. If you're finding that these checkers are super stretched in one point, that's when you need to recut your UVs and unfold again. Moving right along, now we're going to double check our outliner. So you can see that I have my robot cat underscore geo, and I'm going to just add an underscore low. I have my top face, my body, my two arms, the upper and lower are grouped, and then the pincher has a group underneath it. So I'm just going to combine all of these in my modeling toolkit. I can just go to combine and then delete history, freeze transformation, and let's just call this pincer. Now, since I'm not actually moving my pincer when I animate it, I think it'll be fine if I just throw it in the arm category or the arm group. And then I have my two eyes as well as left and right. So that's a pretty clean organization that I would like you guys to have as well. Okay, so next thing is deleting history and freezing transformations of everything. So I'm just going to do one more click and drag to select everything, delete history, freeze transformations, and you know I always like to click it twice or more. All right, next we want to go to modify, search, and replace names, and we're just going to add that low and underneath everything. So I'm going to search for $, so that's just like a wild card, and then add replace with underscore low. And I always forget whether it's hierarchy or selected, so I'm just going to hit replace. And so that worked perfectly. So the way I selected it, clicking and dragging, and then doing search and replace names with hierarchy worked fine. Great. Okay, so we've got our cleanup, we've got our low. Next thing to do is to smooth this. So if I select my object and hit 1, you can see that my object is really low resolution. And if I project my high resolution smooth onto this, I may have projection issues just because it is so jagged compared to a high resolution smooth version. So since I'm not using this in the game, I am going to smooth out some of my main pieces. So for the head, we're going to go to mesh and smooth. And for subdivisions, this one I think I'm just going to do 1 to keep it nice and low poly. The eyes are fine. The body could definitely use a smooth, so actually I don't need this panel anymore, so I'm just going to go back to my perspective view. This could definitely use smoothing, so the last used command, you can repeat that by pressing G. So I did 1 smooth. This could probably use a smooth. This, I actually am not going to smooth it, but I will add just a couple holding. Actually, I don't need holding edges on this low resolution one. And then this one, because we beveled it already, we don't need any extra smoothing on that. Okay, so this is our low poly version. And so I'm just going to go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge, and then immediately go to File, Export Selection, and save it as an FBX. I'm going to use my name and Robot Cat. We found last time that FBX seemed to work a little bit better in Substance Painter, and I'm going to ignore any error messages. Okay, so now is a fantastic time to go into Substance Painter and create our file. So for template, I'm just going to leave that blank. For file, I'm going to select my robot cat low and hit open. For document resolution, I'm going to use 4K because I crammed everything into that one UDIM. Normal map, we'll use DirectX because I would like to use it possibly in Unreal Engine one day, and that means I should turn on compute tangent space per fragment. We have been talking about UDIMs, so I'm going to use the UV tile workflow. So let's click that on and preserve UV tile layout per material. And I'm going to hit OK. Don't save. All right, and it failed to load my scene. So I'm going to click on that and see what my error message is. And it says errors have been found because one of my lower arms is spanning across multiple UDIMs. So it failed to open the scene. So let's go back to Maya. I'm going to go back to my panels, save layouts, and see my UV editor. Grab my whole model again. And while it looks okay, I'm going to select my UV shells, select all of them. You can see now that I've selected them all that it is running into this top and lower UDIMs. So I just need to scale those down. There we go. Select my object. I'm going to do mesh display, soften edge one more time, file, export selection, save it as that FBX. Make sure smoothing groups and smooth mesh are on if your mesh is smooth, and I'm going to replace that. And now I can open that back up in Substance Painter, do File and New, select my robot cat low, and keep those settings the same, and hit Open. And now you can see I have my cat and all of my pieces all in one nice tile, and I just have one tile I'm going to be working with. Great. Okay, so let's prepare the high resolution that we're going to bake. Okay, so I'm going to just go back to my perspective view, grab my low geo version. I'm going to Command D to duplicate it, and let's rename this _high. I'm going to hide the display. So under display, we can do hide and hide selection. That's going to gray that out. So now we know we're just working with this high resolution model. So I'm just going to select all of these guys. Maybe just select them all here. And go to modify, search and replace names. Search for _low, replace with _high. I'm going to do hierarchy and hit replace. And let's see if that worked. It did. Great. All right, so now we've done that. We can extra smooth our model. And basically what I'm going to do here is smooth all of these pieces a little extra. I'm going to separate these pieces so I can add some extra holding edges. And then I'm going to combine them again. I've sped this up quite a bit. But when you are smoothing, make sure that you can bevel. So I'm just clicking these edge loops where I'd like to add a tiny bit of smoothing or holding. Same with this arm piece, just a tiny bit of bevel, and then adding a few extra multi-cuts will make this piece, it needs to be similar enough to the low poly version that when we're baking that there's no issues. So it definitely requires a bit of playing around with settings, and you may have to bake one or more times once we get into Substance Painter, but it's worth it to fix any issues up front than it is to have issues later on. And always remember when you're recombining to delete history and freeze transformations and get rid of any unnecessary groups. You also want to make sure that your naming conventions is correct. I have one that's got _high with a 1 afterwards, so definitely going to need to fix that or you'll have problems with the baking. Okay, so now that we're all done with this high resolution, I'm going to go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge, File, and Export Selection. I'm going to export this one with an _high and keep with the FBX export. And there is some material in here it doesn't like, but it's not affecting my model. Great, so now we're back in Substance Painter, and we're going to bake the high resolution onto the low, or high poly onto the low. And I need to click on my texture itself in order to get the bake settings. So scroll down to Bake Mesh Maps. And because this is a test, I'm just going to do 1024 resolution. And then dilation width, you can expand this. And then let's select the high definition mesh. So just grab that one. And max frontal distance, I can play around with that later. Anti-aliasing, this is another one that once we're happy with the preliminary bake, I'm going to crank up the settings for it to subsample 8x8. And match by mesh name is fine. And I don't really need height or normals or opacity right now. So I'm just going to hit Bake Selected Textures and see how it goes. You can see now it is going a lot faster and there's only one texture set to bake. Okay, so you can see now that I've finished baking, there is a bit of a problem on the claw or the pinchers. And there are problems at the side of the face. So I'm going to try one more bake with increasing the max frontal distance to see if that will capture that. So just increase that and give that a try. I can also increase my subsampling a little bit and see if that helps. And it does actually help this particular bake. I've sped that up a little bit, and you can see that problem has been fixed. There is one kind of issue. The head isn't looking, perfect, and there's a little bit of a weirdness around the ear. So I'm going to do some trial and error fixes, which is perfectly normal. So probably what I'm just going to do is go back to Maya and maybe grab this head and smooth it out for my low resolution one, and then re-import the file and rebake it again. So I've created a brand new folder or a brand new file using the new low resolution with a smoother low resolution head and baked it, and that creates a much nicer overall bake. So there's definitely some trial and error, and I'm happy to help you try and fix things. We don't have to be 100% low poly, so it's okay if you want to have a higher quality bake at this point than maybe having the lowest poly model. Okay, so I'm just going to show you one last thing, which is the highest quality bake settings that I recommend. So if you do have a super strong computer, you can do 4K, or here's 8K, subsampling 8x8. And I did change the max frontal distance a tiny bit, but otherwise you can crank up the secondary rays. And this will give you just slightly higher quality. Since we do only have one texture set, it shouldn't take that long, and I'll show you the result. And here we have our final bake. Go ahead and move on to texturing. I definitely want you to use stylized textures, and those will be in the next video. And I also want you to use stenciling and hand painting for this final project. All right, thanks so much.